No. Now, after I configure the web service, okay, there is when you click right click in the web application, there is option deploy.
Yeah.
This deploy like compiler.
No, this deploy is like you are putting your whatever you write the code and everything, the server pages you are putting in the server for the running. Once you put this, then you can access those services. Deploying is nothing but uploading your services to the server, and then after that you just access those server services. It is not compiling. Compiling is debug. There is an option called debug.
Debug, if there is something error, he will debug for you. Where is the
Yes,
error?
yes, that is, that is clean, and debug will compile and build it successfully. Deploy will not check for any compilation errors. Instead, deploy is just to take all your contents, what you have created or you have edited, and you want to save that in the server. So you want to update that in the server. For example, in case you are editing, that will be deployed in the sense all these files will be sent to the server.
And after I did configuration and the source code, after
Yes.
I did deploy, that's mean I will see in the web surface and
In the Glassfish server, you are putting all these services in the Glassfish.
Yes.
Okay, and then you can access from the local host. After that, it will be accessible.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that you all did the activities of the part 2, which is very interesting to create web services and to access the web services.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Can you show us how to download the GDK?
Yeah, I sent you the links for the JDK. Did you download it from the link or?
For Windows.
Yeah.
Mac.
Oh, Mac, it's okay. Just Google it. Just Google it for Mac. You will get it.
I Googled, but I didn't find it.
For the Mac.
Yes.
I believe it will work for everything, for Mac and everything. But still, let me check that, inshallah. Did you send me an email? I saw some email about it.
Yes, this is me.
Okay. No worries. I'll show that, inshallah. I will send you that, inshallah. No problem. But I believe it will be the same process.
In the midterm will become the like doing some program like a web server or something like that.
Where in the lecture? You mean in the class?
I mean in midterm.
Sorry, in the midterm exam. See, there is no midterm exam. There will be online, in-campus, on-computer exam. Inshallah, I will discuss this with you guys, what are the different type of questions you may face from where. I'm just see that might be we'll just take only block 1 for the test. And from the block 1, of course, we're going to ask the questions in terms of multiple choice questions. Please do the activities, okay? Whatever the activities recommended here from part 1 to part 5 of block 1, do all those activities, okay? So you may get questions from the theory part, you may get questions from the practical part, but it will be all optional type. Okay, for example, like you see the web service annotations. So might be what is that web service, or how you write the web service annotation, parameter annotation, how it will be. If I want to access the web service, uh, what is the code or the procedure, something like that. And it is optional type. Okay. But you have to do all the activities. The activities are very important because this will help you in doing your TMA, and it will also help you in the final exam. And inshallah, after I complete the block 1, I will take one application to show you that how it will be written, and if it comes in the final exam, how you have to deal with that. Okay, I will show that inshallah. But in the class, I'm going to take the theory parts, and for the activities, actually this has to be done by the students and guided by the tutor. But I'm recording the videos. I'm recording the videos for that, and I will send you that inshallah. Okay. Yeah, this lecture will be recorded inshallah and will be shared with everyone. Is there any?
Doctor, now the HTML, XCM, and XM,
Yes.
this required from our end or no?
HTML, we have block 1, part 4 is about HTML. Okay. From your side, we need HTML, some JavaScript, some XML and JSON. Okay, it is required. You have to go through it and learn the basics of it. Okay, HTML we have in part 5. Sorry, the part 4 of block 1, which is hopefully we can take it today. If we can cover part 3, REST and JSON, and then inshallah we'll take part 4, which is HTML, which I believe it's very easy and you can learn online, and a lot of videos, lot of resources are available.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Doctor,
Yes.
just another question. What's
Yeah.
about another class
Another class for what?
that's added in SIS?
I did not get you. Which class?
The, in SIS,
Okay.
that double class now we have in.
For this course?
Yes.
Might be some practical hour is added. Let me check that inshallah and I'll get back to you. So we'll say what is that practical? Okay, fine. I'll check that inshallah. If it is added a practical hour, that is very good for us. Inshallah, we can have one practical hour in that case. On Monday it is. Oh, you mean the office hour? It is of e-office hour. What time it is added for you? 2 to 4? No, it will not be 2 hours. If it is practical lab hour, it will not be 2 hours. Let me check it and see inshallah where it is actually. What time it is added. Attended course report. This is only 42 to 7. Wednesday 2 to 4 we have. Monday 2 to 4. No, actually, this is not a practical hour. I think it is some system error or some technical error, because we have only a one class for this course.
All
As per
courses, double the lectures.
all courses, it is added like this.
Yes.
Might be some technical error. Let's see that. It might be some technical error. But it could have added like a practical hour. That could have a good option for us to discuss, the practical lab session instead of recording videos. But anyhow, inshallah, is those recording videos of activities are useful to you? Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor. I didn't do it because I still
Because of
didn't.
JD. Yeah, because
Yeah.
of JD. I understand your case. But what about other students? Is the recording of the activities is useful to you? Or you're working on it, doing these activities or not? Because from the beginning, I'm telling you that this is very important to do the activities. It's very, very important to do the activities, okay? Fine. So very good. I will continue recording the activities for you. And we all know that we have to cover the syllabus on time. You have coming days you are having the midterm exam, which is in campus on computers in the lab, and also you will get the TMA very soon. So for that we need to cover at least the first block one, and then inshallah we'll see block 2 and block 3 will be easy inshallah. So let's start today's session. Let me put this on recording. Today, inshallah, we'll take part 3 of block 1, which talks about web services again, which is using REST. We'll understand what is REST, and then we'll talk about the RESTful web services in the activity. And then we'll discuss about JSON representation of the services or the data. We have seen the XML representation of the data transfer, and then here we'll introduce JSON representation of the data, which is JavaScript object notation. It's very easy and simple to understand. So let's start. Today, inshallah, we'll talk about the introduction to REST and JSON. REST is nothing but representational state transfer. That is a transfer of any object from the server. Object here, it means, for example, any product, any data about the product. Okay, so that's the transfer of this data. Okay, and its state. State, it means its values. For example, in the server, in the database, we have a product called milk. So this milk product has ID M1, has a price, has a brand, something like this. These are all data, right? This data, when we retrieve it, we transfer the data to the client when it is requested from the client. So it goes to the client with the current values, right? And this is the state. These values, for example, the product code M1, the price, let's say $10, the brand, let's say Almarai. These are the values. Okay, this becomes the state of that object product. So that transfers right from the. So we see that representational state transfer, which is called REST. Fine, and we talk about what is a REST-based web service operations, which is RESTful web services. We call that as an RESTful web services. We have seen the web services in our last meeting and even that activity discussion, which is about SOAP web service. And SOAP uses XML for the exchange of the messages or exchange of the data, right? We have seen that. So here we'll talk about REST. We'll talk about REST principles and mechanisms. REST is not a technology or something like that. The REST is just principles or guidelines, okay, and a mechanism that is adopted to exchange the messages. Fine. So that's REST. We cannot say REST is a technology or REST is a protocol. No, it is not a protocol. It's not like HTTP, right? But it is just a guidelines or principles and mechanism that is used, okay, for to create the web services. So any web services which is using REST principles or following the REST guidelines, we call that as a RESTful web service. Okay, so then we'll encounter difference between REST and SOAP or HTTP, and then different approaches to the web services, whether to use REST or to use SOAP, and what percentage of REST is used in the world when it comes to the web services. We talk about JSON because REST uses JSON as another way to represent the data, right? In exchange of the messages or exchange of the data, it uses JSON format, right? So it uses JSON and it uses XML and it uses JSON also. So we'll talk about JSON and we'll see what is introduction to the JSON syntax with example, fine. And we'll see that how we can convert a JSON into XML or an XML to JSON. So you need to learn about this. Like if it is given to you a JSON file, you have to write that equivalent XML file, or XML file, you have to write an equivalent JSON file. And this will be asked in your assessments, might be in the final exam, right? Or might be in the midterm exam, fine. And then after that, you have to do the activities of REST and JSON from the activities of the block 1 part 3, fine, which will discuss REST and JSON implementation. So let's start with the REST and JSON, introduction to the REST and JSON. We all know that web services are a set of technologies designed to facilitate machine-to-machine communication. So through web services, the machine-to-machine communication is being done. And we have seen in case of the SOAP web service, what we did in the activities of the part 2, that we want to transfer some, data, or we want to access some services from two different applications. So I want to show that in the NetBeans, that what we have done in case of SOAP. So I have created that here, the web services. You can see that in the activities that I have created the web service called My Web App, where I have created a web service called Welcome. Okay, and this web services, it has different operations. It has addition, multiplication, subtraction, and divide. So this is the source code of this one. So web service called Welcome, where I have 4 different operations. Okay, web method operation name addition, web method operation name multiplication. So every method is an operation here. Okay, we have a subtraction and we have divide. Fine. So these are web services, and you can see these in the web services folder, all these web services. So this is created, and when I test these web services, fine, and I will find that I can see that these web services, I can use it, test it here. This is a web service tester file where I have the 4 different operations which I wrote. And for example, in this case of divide, if I say 10 divided by 2, for example, and call this operation, fine. So we see that SOAP request in a form of XML file. SOAP make a request with two different data, which is number 1 and number 2, which I specified. And this is in SOAP XML file. We have the head envelope, we have the header, body of the SOAP and its elements, fine, in a XML format. So this request goes to the server, right? To the server, which is in the NetBeans. We can see the operations. Take the, do the operation division of 10 divided by 2 and returns the response in a SOAP XML file. This is a SOAP response. Okay, so this we have seen that in our in the NetBeans, this is a SOAP web services that we have created and we have seen in the NetBeans. Now to access this, see, this is I have created in my web app. This is my web application, and my web application I have created these services, fine, and I deployed these services to the server. Okay, to the server. So in the server, my web app, I have these services. Now I want to access these services from another application. So I have created this another application, which is activity 1.5, which if you do, and I need to call these services. I need to use these services. Once you use it, you will get all these services reference. You can see here, all these services are used here. And in my file, I can just simply call those services, right? For example, I'm using this multiplication, addition and all. So it's a process that how you can call them. So now I can simply use these numbers and call, this multiplication, and multiplication comes from task1.welcome services. Okay, and we have this multiplication of number 1, number 2. This is system generated code, right? We are not writing this, we're just writing this, okay, by adding all these services, fine. So this is another application. You can see here, this is another application, and this is my web application, which is in the server, of course, in the local host server. So here, when I call this, when I run this file, okay, it asks me the user enter number 1. For example, I enter 12, 3, and get the multiplication, which is 36 here. So it gives me the result here. So from where it is calling that it is going to this my web service here, to my web app, and going to that welcome service and calling this multiplications operation and returning back result over here, which is the sending of these two numbers, which is number 1 and number 2, what I enter in a SOAP XML format to this server, do all the operation and return the response in a SOAP, and we get the result here, and the result is displayed here. So this is, you see that this how the service works, how the web service work. So my concern here is what, just to show you that how the web services work, fine. So web services are nothing but technologies which is designed for machine-to-machine communication from client to the server, or between two applications, between two servers, for example. Okay, so in reality, for example, we see that we have a lot of applications like the commerce application, right? So for example, we have Noon, Amazon and all, right? So these applications has stores inside, it has a stores, right? Even I can register here there as a store if I have a store or I have a shop. Okay, so my database, my shop has some data, right, that I want to provide to the Noon application. So Noon application send a request to me and for a data from my database, which is from my shop database. So this comes, if I write a web service for that, I can give this web service to the Noon application. Noon application gets connect to this web service and retrieve the data from my database, which can be done by which the messages or the data being exchanged between the Noon and my shop application or my shop database in a form of XML. Okay, so this is what the web service is now. Now we have seen that which is described using XML, which is SOAP-based XML web services, right? So we will also encounter here now JSON based web services, which is to exchange the data by using JSON format, which is very simple format. Okay. Now, REST is nothing but representational state transfer. Representational state transfer. REST refers to an architectural style that encompass the common web standards, which is such as the URL, HTTP standards, HTML, XML, and so on. Okay, so REST uses these standards and gives you some guidelines or some principles how you can communicate between two applications or between two servers or between two machines. Okay, REST is originally coined or described by Roy Fielding in his PhD dissertation in 2000, in early 2000. Okay, to describe an architectural style of system networking that does not require any additional mechanism or protocols, because REST does not use any additional protocols, does not introduce any new things. It uses the existing protocols, existing rules, and gives you some rules to exchange the data or to exchange the messages. The aim of the REST in terms of delivering web service is to ensure that the RESTful web services retain all the benefit of the design of web in terms of loosely coupled services, scalable services, open standard based, and vendor independent services. Okay, all the services will be loosely coupled. It is not fixed to any particular things or any particular platforms. Okay, highly scalable, and it uses the open standards. It follows the open standards. So it means that cross-platform working can easily be done. Fine. So any web service that uses REST principles or that follows the REST principle, we call that as in RESTful web services. RESTful web services. So here we need to understand a resource when we talk about RESTful web services. Okay, so RESTful web services consider the object or a message that will be exchanged as a resource, Okay, so a resource is a piece of data that is accessible at any time over a network. So for example, in the database, I have a product, okay, for which I have a product ID, I have a product name, for example, I have a product price, for example. Okay, so all these data together, fine, is a resource. What is a resource? So any piece of data that is an object, okay, that holds the data at any time over a network is what is a resource. And resource is defined by unique address and the representation that yielded by that address. The address of any resource on the internet is given by URI, which is Uniform Resource Identifier. This URI identifies the resource over the network. Okay, so URI is almost like very similar to the URL what we have seen. Okay, so but a resource is not always the web page which is used, which is accessed by the URL. Okay, so it is not necessary for a specific URI to actually exist a web page. It is not necessary that when we write this URI to get the web page. No, URI can be used to get only the object, only the data. Not, we are not looking to for any web page there or a new web page. When I click on this resource, I should get a new web page. No, just get the data, get this object. For example, if I want just the product with ID number 1, okay, its name and price. So this is a resource. For example, ID 1, name, milk, price $10. This is just a resource. This is a resource. It's packed as an object, is a resource. Okay, not necessarily it is an object. Oh, sorry, it's a web page. Fine. So the idea behind the REST is that a client requesting any resource, okay, using URI, receives the response that places a client either in a new or a refreshed state. new or a refreshed state, in the sense if the resource is being updated or changed, or it is a new resource. Okay, that's what it means, that either it is a new or a refreshed state. Fine. So that means that the product, a new product is added, that's a new state. A product is being updated, that's a refreshed state. Okay, and uh, any existing product is a state, existing state. Fine. So whenever a client requests a resource, it receives a response that puts the client in a new state or in a refreshed state to know the product. Okay, updates, its updates. So the view of the web service reduces the model to very simple set of concept, which is state, transition, and a transport protocol to allow the transition to be navigated. What is the state of the resource, the transition of the resource, and using the protocol to transfer this resource. Okay, so the mapping can be done here is that, for example, a state is an HTTP response. That is, either we get the data from the server, that is a HTTP response, that when request a resource, we get a data. So that data, what is coming with its values, that is the object with its values, is a state. So as I said, for example, in the database, there is a data called a product. Okay, there is a product. So product has an ID, for example, ID 1, and the name, for example, milk. Okay, and the price, for example, $10. This is a state. It comes as an HTTP response. And a transition is another state that is accessible from the current state. That is, for example, I took all this object. Okay, based on this, that I can access, or update this data, or I can delete this data, or I can, refresh this to check whether it has been updated or not. Right? So that becomes a transition. So a transition is another state that is accessible from the current state. So this URI to access the resource is available in the current state itself. And for the transfer of these states or transfer of these objects, simple protocol, which is HTTP, can be used. Okay, so this is three things: state, transition of the state, that is exchange of the messages, and the protocol which is used, HTTP. So RESTful web services are described as stateless, so that each request has to be complete in carrying all the information required to process the request. No information can be stored on the server about the request and the response. Fine. So these are stateless. So you're not going to store anything about the request and the response of the RESTful web services in the server. We just take the data and brings to the client. The client know the state of that object. Fine, and can request for either update this or just delete it. Fine. So whatever the operation is being requested by the client. Web services has a simple uniform interface that usually realized by HTTP standard operations, which is either get operation, put operation, post, or delete operations. And the resources are identified uniquely by the URIs. Each HTTP operation has a well-defined action. These operations has an action. For example, get is to retrieve the data from the or request the data from the server. Put is to update, for example. Post is to insert new data, and delete is to delete the objects or the data in the server. So here it is described: the get operation retrieve a representations of the resource in a specified representation. Post operation use the data in the request body to modify the resource. Put operation create or set the current state resource identified by URL. Delete operation delete the specified resource on the server, and head operation retrieve the header information about the, for example, about the client platform and so on. Okay, so for example, let's take an example to understand it better, the REST principles and mechanism. Let's say, for example, we want to convey to the light whether to be on or off, okay, as a RESTful service. So we want to put the light on or off as a service, fine, on the back in the server application. So we can use a HTTP put method to send a request to the light to put it on. Okay, so we'll say put true. True, it means on. Let's say true is on. Okay, and false is off. So we say true to the light resource. Fine. So this URI gets this light resource on this server and set it to true to keep the light on or turn the light on. And similarly, we can put false here to this URI to turn the light off. Okay, and if you want to know whether it is on or off, we can request a get method of the HTTP that will return either true or false, okay, to tell that whether it is on or off. Okay, so you see that this is just a mechanism. The rest is just a mechanism or guidelines, fine, that how we access the resources over the network. Okay, so fine, with the activities, you will see that how the RESTful web services are created and how the web services, RESTful web services are used. Fine. So we will see that during when we do the activities, inshallah, we'll see that that how we create the RESTful web services and how these will be accessed. Now, REST web services can use HTTP directly, just it's normally for any accessing websites or emails and all. Firewalls can operate on REST request and so on. So that means that firewalls can control the REST requests. Okay. SOAP is carried out over HTTP and not itself recognized or understood by the firewall, because SOAP comes as an HTML, XML files, okay, and it is not controlled by the firewalls. There is a difference between there is a comparison here done by the done here for the REST and SOAP. REST is a stateless methodology or a style, okay, and SOAP is a W3 standard, so it follows some standard, whereas REST is just a principle or guidelines. REST are transported via HTTP and HTTP, and SOAP are normally use HTTPS, or but other mechanisms can also be invoked for SOAP. Request is transported as URI, whereas here the request is transported as an XML file. So we have seen in the SOAP how the SOAP request goes in a form of XML file. But in case of REST, it goes as an uniform resource identifier. It does not create an XML file for that. Response can be in XML or JSON or other text-based method, whereas in SOAP response data is again an XML. We have seen that SOAP response, it is completely in XML. But in response data, in the REST, it is XML, or it can be JSON or any other text-based method. So it's very open here. Okay. So, and analysis of URI and HTTP method indicate intent. So if you analyze this URI, it's very clear that what is the message is being exchanged. Fine. And for in case of SOAP, you need to process the XML file to analyze what is being exchanged here. Okay. So this is a comparison between REST and SOAP. Okay, fine. So you have to go through this all. Now let us see different approaches to the web services. We have seen the SOAP approach to for the web services. So we call that as a SOAP-based XML web services. Fine. So here there is an example here. Amazon has created a web services that are available via both SOAP and REST, and has reported around 80% of the requests of these services are made using REST instead of SOAP. While other organizations such as Google have favored SOAP, and other significant organization adopted REST, such as Yahoo and eBay and all. So you can see the test line. There exists both type of services. Okay, web services using SOAP and web services using REST. Okay, so it's still in the market. It exists both type of web services to access, whether it is a RESTful web services or SOAP-based web services. The current time, the REST CAM can perhaps claim a greater following. However, SOAP CAM retains perhaps greater respectability to its standardization efforts and claim to be flexibility. You can do this activity to learn more about this, the BBC RESTful client service. Now that's about the REST web services. Fine. The next part of this, block 1 part 3 is knowing about JSON. Okay, because we have seen the XML in part 2. Fine. That the SOAP uses XML for the exchange of messages, whereas in RESTful web services may use XML, JSON, or any text-based method can be used to exchange of the resources or the messages. So we need to understand here JSON. So let's understand JSON, which can be used here for exchange of resources between the application or between the machines. Okay, while we write the RESTful web services. Two approaches to the web services we have seen, the SOAP and RESTful web services. There are also two distinct methods for exchanging the messages over HTTP on these two web services. In part 2, we have looked at XML as a text-based message system, which SOAP uses. When considering REST, we also need to consider JSON as a lightweight data interchange format that is widely adopted. It's a lightweight data interchange format. Okay. Fine. While XML is a tried and tested technology and used for a huge number of applications, JSON advantage are that it tend to be more compact than XML, understand JavaScript, and some would argue that it's easier to read and write. So for a JSON, we can easily convert into a JavaScript object. JSON files can be easily converted into JavaScript object and use those objects, to interpret the data easily. So JSON is nothing but a JavaScript object notation, and it is a simple text-based format which is used in conjunction with the REST APIs. It retrieves data from web server and display that data within a web application or simply as a web page. JSON standard is maintained by JSON organization. You can check this JSON organization. It gives you all details about the JSON, what is the syntax of JSON and how you write the JSON files and all. Okay. One of the advantage of JSON or XML is that it is closely based on notations such as JavaScript uses to create arrays and objects rather than using parser. You can simply use standard JavaScript functions to convert JSON data into JavaScript object, and when our applications are delivering using HTML file, this becomes a useful advantage. That means that you can simply convert the JSON file or JSON file objects, JSON data into JavaScript object. And once it is converted into JavaScript object, you can write the JavaScript code to retrieve the data or to read the data or to do the processing and everything. Okay. So once a JSON message is created, it is easy to exchange the data because it is just a plain text format. It is in a text format. Okay. JSON has many advantages. The format is compact. It is easy to read both by the computer and the people. It can easily map with the data structures of many programming languages, like any programming language. Okay, you can easily map the JSON, the objects. Okay, in terms of numbers, strings, null, arrays, and all. Many programming language contain function libraries to read and write JSON structures. JSON is commonly used in web applications for the data transfer using AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript, that will let to exchange the data, okay, and the messages between the browser and the server without having to reload the page itself. Sometimes we see that a part of the page is being updated, right? For example, the temperature, if you're looking the temperature over the web page, only the temperature keeps on changing. Not the whole page is being read, and not the whole page is being refreshed. Only the temperature may keep on changing. So how this only part of this web page is changing? It is by using AJAX, and AJAX uses JSON to send and receive the data. That is the data as a data format that is being exchanged between the server and the client. Okay. So a user browsing an online shop will select a particular item. This is just a case. For example, whenever we go to any online shopping application or a web application, we just see the product, click on that product. You will see that only that product details are updated. Only you see that some product details are updated. Okay. Now, not the whole page is being updated. Okay, so what happens is that the JSON data file is generated, and it uses the AJAX to send and receive the data, okay, from the server, okay, and update only that part of the web page. Okay, so JSON basic syntax is considered as a subset of JavaScript object notation syntax, which is represented by using name value pair. The data is separated by comma, and the curly braces hold objects, fine, and the square bracket hold arrays. So that means that if you are writing an array in the JSON, it is in by using square brackets. If you are writing objects, it is in by using the curly braces, fine. For example, it is a name value pair. For example, if you want to represent a JSON data by giving a name and a value, for example, the maker name and the make and fold. So this is a JSON data. Okay, if you put this in a curly brackets, it becomes an object, the JSON object. Fine. JSON values can be a number, it can be a string, a boolean, true, false, an array, which is contained inside a square bracket separated by comma, or an object that is contained inside a curly bracket and separated by comma with a name and value pair. Okay, and it can be a null. It will also accept the null to represent a null value. Fine. JSON objects likely to contain more than one set of JSON data when each separated by comma. For example, here you say that this is a JSON object has two set of data, make, fold, model, focus, right? So this is two set of data inside a one object. JSON array are written inside the square brackets, which is something like this. An array may have different objects, or it can have values separated by comma, or it can have the objects. For example, I can create a JSON array called marks, okay, with double colon here, fine. And I can put the marks here like 10, 20 separated by comma, okay, close in the square bracket. Fine. Now in this example, we see that how the JSON object creation using JavaScript inside the HTML document. So for example, this is a JSON object. You see this is a JSON object, okay, whose name is text. Fine. So this is JSON object. You can convert this JSON object, fine, into, so this is the data which you convert into a JSON object and use this object, fine, to retrieve the data. Okay, so this is the data, fine, with name value pair. Okay, so I'm just converting that into an object using JSON.parse of text, fine, and use this object, object.customer, will give you this, object.address line 1 will give you this, object.postcode will give you this. Fine. So document.getElement by ID demo will call this element, product element, and inner HTML. So I'm going to put here all this data. Fine, I'm going to put here all this data. If you want to see this in the HTML file, it's very simple. I think I have that in NetBeans. Here, a JSON example. Yeah, here. Over here, this one, I have a HTML tag called paragraph where I have nothing here. Fine. So its ID is demo. So it says document.getElement ID by demo. It means that this element. Okay. Dot inner HTML, it means that here. Fine. Is equal to object.customer. Now what is this object? Object is an JSON object. We make the JSON object from this text file or from this text data. Okay. Object.json.parts of text, and now object.customer, it means this, and object.address line 1, it means this data, and object.postcode, it means this data. Fine. So these are the names, and these are the values, the names and the values. Fine. So now if I run this file, so let's say for example, if I run this file, I have these values for these names. Okay, I have these values here. Fine. So this is very simple, that JSON text can easily interpreted by JavaScript, and we can go through this text and get the data. Fine. Now, brother, do you have any question? I think there's someone is unmuting. Okay. Hello, do you have any question? Let's see, I think it's by mistake. Anyway, so here you see that consider this JSON format. So you can see this is a JSON format text, like we have the name, value, its name and the value. Okay, customer, content is now is an array which has again JSON objects. Fine. So this is a complete JSON for file. You can put this in a file and call that as a JSON file. Okay, tell data. Fine. So you can simply use this. We have another example here just to retrieve the data if you want in the NetBeans. So let's try that. In the NetBeans, I have this here. So for example, here I have this my JSON as name John, age 30, car as null. I can pass that into a JSON object, and now I can use this a for loop here in the script. This is a JavaScript for loop here to retrieve every element and its value, right? So for where X in my job, my object is we have converted this my JSON into object. So it has X, it means the name. Fine. And object of X, it means the value. Fine. So this is added to the text, and finally I'm putting this text in the demo over here. Fine. So if you see the result of this, in the browser, so you can see the name, what I have here, age, and the car value. Fine. Okay. Fine. Now let us see that how we can convert this JSON into an XML. Fine. JSON can be put into an XML file. Okay, so what can be the equivalent XML file? What can be the equivalent XML file for this? Is that we have to write an XML for this. Okay, from the top, we have to consider all the tags so that XML comes in a tags. So you have to give proper tags and their values. Okay, so you can check for this. This can be an XML file. Okay, so we consider an object here on top of it, object and a property, and the key is this and the number is this, or a key value pair, because it is key value pair, right? So it's a key and it's a value, right? So we have this key value pair here. So it's for a first property, it is key is this and the value is this. That is a number. Second property, we have the key and the value. That can be a string. Third property, customer email value as a string. Fourth property, contents. Now this content is an array. Content is an array. So I'm adding here an array. Array is an object and it has a properties, that is arrays has an object. So these are the objects inside the array. And this has a properties key and a value, that is number, key and the number, and so on. Okay. So this is how we can convert an JSON into an XML file. So you need to practice that, at how to convert an XML, a JSON code into an XML, or a JSON file data into an XML, or a JSON XML to a JSON code. Fine. So this is about the JSON. You can learn more about the JSON on w3schools.com. Okay, it has all about the JSON, or you can learn on json.org. Fine. It has a lot about, I mean, all the details about the JSON and how we can, interpret the JSON in JavaScript. Yes, please.
So JSON is JavaScript?
No, it's not a JavaScript. JSON is not a JavaScript. JSON is just a method to represent the data in a object form, where there is the objects are put in curly brackets, which is you can use the key and the value pair, and we can put the values in numbers, in strings, okay, in true, false, boolean, fine, even null we can put. We can create the arrays in JSON, which are use the square brackets, fine. So any JSON will have only the data, okay, and they are not a JavaScript, but JavaScript uh, can interpret the JSON objects, okay, by using that parse method with what we have seen here, json.parse. This is the JSON code, this is the JSON data, right? So JavaScript has this method of converting this into an object and using this object to retrieve all this data. Fine. So any data we can put it in this format, in this JSON format, and create an object of it and use in the JavaScript to retrieve the data or to process the data. Okay. And it is not a JavaScript file. It is just a data file which has some data. Yeah. Okay. Because JavaScript will have the coding. JavaScript file, it means you have that coding and programming type. But JSON file will not have that programming things. JSON will have that data itself. Okay. If you look at some JSON file here, I'll just show you in the NetBeans. Like there is some JSON files I created here. Yeah, you see this JSON file. This is a JSON file with the extension JSON. Okay, so it does not have any coding. I just have a names and objects. For example, here this is in JSON object, which has key value pairs, keys and version and main and this value, and this has an array. This is an array with one element and so on. This package.json, right? This is the JSON file. It does not have any coding at all, any programming. It just contains the data, right? And in JavaScript, we can convert this JSON into an object and we can use that object to retrieve the data and process the data. Fine. So this is about the JSON, and moving ahead, we have this development material is of course about your practical, the activity of this part, which is part 3 activities. Fine. So you can find these activities, as we all know that we have that activities and activity instructions that we need to follow. So you can look at these activities of part 3. We have these activities which we have to do, and we have these activities instructions which we follow to do these activities. We all know about this. We have these activities instructions which is here for part 3, right? That is about the RESTful web services, and REST and JSON is given here. Fine. And you have an activity delicious REST and JSON. This is an optional activity. Okay, so these are activities related to the part 3, and inshallah I'm gonna make one video of these activities to support you to do these activities of the RESTful web services and to understand the JSON also. Okay, so this is about the part 3 what we have for you in this course M352 block 1 part 3. Okay, so if you have any doubt in REST and JSON, please go ahead before we start with the next topic. Any questions, any doubts? We'll utilize this time, to discuss the questions. Otherwise, we'll move to the next topic. I believe so far it is clear.
It's not clear. We need to do it a practice, teacher, before you.
Yes, of course. The theory concept, is that clear till now?
Yeah, it's clear, but a lot of formation, HTML, XTML, a lot of things, JSON.
No, I'm just asking about JSON and the REST. What do you have, the REST concept and the JSON? Yeah, of course, I know that we have to do the practically, because these are things, practical things, right? So we have to do the practical, and we will do that inshallah as an activities, right? But my concern is that what we discussed till now with the theory concept of the REST and the JSON. Any doubts, any questions on it? If there is no questions on it, I want to take you to the next topic, which is HTML. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and at the beginning, as I said, you need to learn this JavaScript, you need to learn HTML, you need to know about XML. All right. So as I said at the beginning, so you have to, work on all these at the same time. After you take the lecture, you have to spend some time on knowing some JavaScript, knowing some programming, using JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Sometimes you do need CSS in your TMA, all this, fine. So of course you need to have some knowledge of it. And I'm keep on telling this from the beginning. Okay. JavaScript class, there is no JavaScript class. There is a HTML class here that we can go ahead, but there is no JavaScript class given in the course. but you have to take that as a self-study, okay, to move with this course. We might have just a look at like what is a JavaScript, and that's it. But we cannot have the in detail about JavaScript. Fine. Okay, so let me just make it out here. Fine. Let's have a break of 5 minutes, and then after we come back from the break, we'll discuss the next topic, which is part 4 of this block 1 of the course. Okay, so it will be part 3. Part 4 is part 4. So we'll have just a 5 minutes break and we'll come back, inshallah. Okay. Salam. Welcome back, students. So let's continue today with this topic, part 4 of the block 1, which talks about HTML. Okay, fine. Is the voice and the screen clear to you?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. So here we'll talk about HTML5, where we'll just talk about a simple HTML5 template, what's new in HTML5, the form tag, and some input tags. Okay. More importantly, we just try to understand the web page that has an HTML embedded along with the CSS and some JavaScript, right? So you have seen that we need to know some HTML tags just to understand and work with these web services, and how we can display the data, structure the data on a web page, right? Because HTML5 is HTML basically is used to structure the data on the web page. That means how you put the data on a web page, like fine. Uh, so this is just to structure the data, whereas we use CSS, to create a good presentation of the data, giving the style to the web page. The CSS has been used, and JavaScript is used to give some functionality there to the web page, right? To give some functionality, like for example, to display what data to be displayed and what data not to be displayed, doing some simple calculations and all. JavaScript is being used. Fine. So our concern here is that to learn, to get some concept of HTML5, which is the latest one in HTML, and to get a feel of, or to get to know about JavaScript. Okay, but for all of you, those who know the HTML and JavaScript and CSS, right, it is easy for them, to do this or to learn this, or if even they don't go through these part, it's okay for them. Those who know the JavaScript and those who know the HTML and those who know the CSS, it's okay for them. Okay, but for the students who are new to the HTML, I believe it's very less number of students who are new to the HTML. As a computer science student, fine. If you are new to this HTML, I recommend you to go through W3 schools, right? Where you can learn about HTML, you can learn about CSS, you can learn about JavaScript. And there are some basic crash courses for HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, which is like for 1 hour, 2 hour course on YouTube. You can find from Free Code Camp channel or from other resources, that from where you can easily learn these languages, right? You don't need to spend much time then. Fine. So you have to, go through all this, to get to know about these. Right? So let's start with this one. HTML5 is an hypertext markup language, and which is used to, structure the data, how we place the data in a web page. And we have CSS to give the design or a style to the web pages, and a JavaScript add some functionality to the web pages. And that's three things we have. both HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in combination with the JavaScript, okay, gives a good interactivity to the web pages. Fine, to the client can interact with the web pages by this JavaScript and CSS and all. So if you look at a web page, fine, a web page may have some JavaScript that adds some behavior to the web page, add some functionality to the web page. CSS will give some styles, present how you're going to present the contents of the web page, and the HTML will give structure to the web pages. At the end, in the web page, what you find is the text and the images and the videos and so on, right? So a web page may contain all these: CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. Okay, and you find a good interactive web page. So simple HTML5 template, HTML, basically we have different versions of the HTML. So I don't want to go to the history of HTML 1 to 4, but we'll just look at the HTML5. HTML5 has a clear template which whenever we create any HTML5, okay, I'll just show you that HTML5 in one of the editor where we have. Let me just check that one over there. So you can see here, this is an HTML5 template where we have the doc type HTML with HTML tag specifying the language and the directory, with a header which having a meta tag specifying the character set, and the title inside the header and the body. Fine. So very simple format or very simple template for HTML5 is given. Okay. So the document type, the details of it, we can go through this W3 org fine link to understand that what is the document definition here for the HTML5 fine. There is something called XHTML, which stands for Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. Okay, it is more stricter. It is based on XML. Fine. We're not going to, talk about this XHTML much. Okay, we'll just in general we talk about HTML. Fine. So in the HTML, the important thing what we're gonna mention is the doc type, which is a mandatory, which we just saw here. The doc type as HTML that specifies what type of document it is. That says it is an HTML document. And we also have that XML's attribute of HTML, which is also a mandatory to support XHTML. Okay, so XHTML, HTML, it's okay. You can write this HTML document, and you can do similar like HTML. What you are working in an HTML file, fine. Then we have the HTML tag, we have the header tag, the title tag, and the body tag. These are mandatory when it comes to the XHTML. And then inside the body, we'll have different elements. right? Many different. We can have the forms, paragraph, divisions, images, links, lists, text boxes, all different type of elements which are in HTML can have. And uh, HTML5, we are going to write it in a small letter. All the tags are written in a small letters, not in compare with the previous versions. It is used to be written in capital letters. But in HTML5, we are writing all this in small letters. Find the header tag, the body tag, the any other tags written in a very simple and small letters. Fine. All the elements must be properly nested. This is very important. Element must be have a closed. That is, element must have a closing tag. Fine. Every opening tag there should be a closing tag in the HTML. And just a minute. Then the elements must always be in lowercase, attributes in lowercase. The value of the attributes of elements are quoted, and attribute minimization is forbidden. You cannot minimize the attributes or write the attributes in your own way. So here the difference between the HTML and XHTML is defined here, okay, which is self-explanatory. You can go through this. Fine. Fine. Here is a simple HTML5 template which is given over here, that a doc type HTML language is English, character set is given here. The title comes on the title as a title of the page. Then the meta data about the page, that is what is the name of this page, what is the content of this page, okay, the author and the content, that is the author and the name of the author and so on. And if you are linking to any other document, to this, for example, any other external file you want to add in this document, which is through the link tag, which is inside the header tag, all these inside the header tag. Fine. So you can also link the JavaScript files here in the inside the header tag. CSS files. Here it is linked to the CSS file.
Doctor, what's meta command for what this one?
Meta is just to give the data about this file. For example, this file is a description which has an HTML5 content as an HTML5 template.
That means the page itself. This is
the description about the page itself. Meta is basically, in general, meta term is used in many different places. Even in database, meta is used. So meta basically is nothing but data about something, about the data itself. When we call that data about the data, that is giving the description or giving the information about the document, So here it is an HTML file. So meta is nothing but it's giving data about this HTML file. What is this HTML file? Who is the author of this HTML file? And so on. You can add any number of data in the meta. Just give meta and say what do you want, author, and then any other thing, date of creation, and all this data you can add in the meta. Okay. Fine, brother. You got it? You got it or not? Was that asked the question? Okay, so that's about the meta. I think he lost the connection or what, I don't know. But anyhow, that's about the meta. That's giving a description about the HTML file or this document. Fine, you have the body and the document contained inside the body elements. All these which is displayed on this web page is contained inside the body of the HTML file. So the body, whatever you include inside the body, will be displayed on the page. Okay, so you have many different tags that you're going to use there to display the things in the on the web page. Fine. So you can go through these different tags. For example, here we have the P tag. This refers to a paragraph tag. You have the heading tag, H1, H2 up to H6, that to create the headings. Fine.
Doctor, what about body then document content? What is this? This is not like a paragraph. The graph is.
This is a comment. This is a comment here. It will not be displayed on the web page. Okay. So let me just let me just show you that then it will be more clear to you. I'll just have a web page here. And then I'll use that, inshallah, no problem. Just let me just add a web page here, HTML file as test.html. Okay. Let me share with that NetBeans. Yeah, you can see here I have created this test.html file. Okay, and here we have the doc type. It is an HTML, and I have then HTML. Here I have the meta tags and the to do, the title and so on. Here we write the title, for example, M352 block 1 part 4, for example. This will be the title of my web page. Then meta defining here the character set which I'm going to use, which is being used for in this web page. The viewport, for example, what is the viewport? It's where it is viewed. Okay. You can add more meta here, for example, that is those author and all can be added here. This meta, which is here, the name, description, the author, and all this can be used here when we want to know about the page, like who is the author, who wrote this page, and when it is written, and so on. And here we have the body, and inside the body is that where we write all the elements that will be displayed on the screen. So if I run this page, it will be in a browser. So you can see here that I have here to do contents, and what is that? The heading of this, the title of this is that TM352 block 1 part 4. This is the title what I specified here.
Doctor, okay. It's not appear for the page. It's not appear to us.
Oh, okay, no problem. Just a minute. I think yeah, I shifted here now. Yeah, you can see here now the content of the page. Okay, this is the title, you can see, and this is the content of the page. To do write what content. So fine. So if I just go to the NetBeans and add more contents here, for example, I add a paragraph, P paragraph here. Fine. So here we can add welcome to the course TM. Like that, this is act as a paragraph. You can see that effect in the HTML file, the welcome to the course. Fine. The thing that what you ask is this one is a comment in HTML. I think you know about the comments in programming, right?
Oh, the compiler is not.
Yes, that is not considered as a content, but rather it is just a description about what we are writing. Fine. So if I add a comment here, that will not be displayed. So comments in HTML are written like this. Okay. This is my first HTML page. Something like this. So this acts as a comment in HTML. Okay, and which will not be displayed. So if you see that in the output window in the Chrome or in the browser, you don't find that. Okay, because that is a comment. So I suggest you to go to W3 schools. I can show you here that W3 schools to learn about different elements of this HTML. You see here HTML and W3 schools, fine. We have a lot of facilities in this one to learn. For example, in this HTML, you see introduction and different paragraph tag, how to use this paragraph tag and style tag, tables, lists. Okay, you have the list and all. Importantly, you have these forms, which is very important, to sending the data to the server. Okay, and more HTML elements which are added in HTML5 is canvas and SVG, and audio video tags are added in HTML5. Okay, geolocation to know where is this web page is being accessed, getting the location of the device using geolocation. All is all covered here. So in free time, you can go through all these, give some time here to explore about all the HTML. So this is about the HTML5 template and HTML5, how we write the HTML5, okay? JavaScript, of course, we got to know a bit about the JavaScript, and we are not having much a complete course of JavaScript here, but we just touch it here, and you have to go through this. And you can also learn this JavaScript from W3 schools. W3 schools also provide material on this with examples and all. So basically, JavaScript is a programming language, which is also a scripting language, which is executed line by line. So there is no specific compiler for this. And this is one of the client-side scripting language, which is executed in the browser. For every browser support this JavaScript and its execution. We can embed the JavaScript in the HTML file, and all the browsers comes with this JavaScript, and it can be easily executed in any browser in these days. Okay, you don't need to install any plugin for that. Okay, so JavaScript can be added as in script tag in the header, inside the header. It can be added in the body. It can be added inside the HTML element as an attribute, as you can see over here. Okay, inside an HTML as an attribute. So as you can see over here, fine. So JavaScript can be added. For example, you see this using a script tag, document.write hello world. We'll just play document.write, which means write onto the document hello world. So you can get that hello world here, fine. So this way of writing code, it uses something called document object model of the HTML web pages to get the documents. Okay, document here in the sense, this HTML page is the document. Write is a function that writes hello world. Fine. So we can use this document object model to retrieve the HTML elements, okay, in the JavaScript, and do all the updates or do the processing of the data. Okay. Of course, JavaScript is a programming language. That means you find almost everything what you find in other programming languages, right? You find the operators, you find the elements, you find the looping, selection, if else, looping, for loops, and you find methods, writing the methods, calling the methods, passing the arguments to the methods. All what you learn in other programming language is there in JavaScript, but with a JavaScript syntax. For example, we have the operators. We have a plus operator that can be used to add numbers, but at the same time can be used to add the strings. It is more like in Java. We use plus operator in Java to add the strings, as well as to add the numbers, right? So if you go through the JavaScript and you know the programming, you have learned the programming, you just need to go through to understand its syntax, right? We can write the methods in JavaScript as we write in other programming languages. So how we write the methods in JavaScript is that we have to use the keyword called function and the name of the method with parentheses and opening of the curly brackets and closing becomes the body of the function. So this is the function header and this is the body of the function. Okay, and inside the body of the function we write some code that function performs. Fine. So this is how we write the codes, and we call the other methods. For example, this method need to be called in another method. Let's here validate method. So validate function calls validate username, validate password here from here. These one, okay. And what are these doing? It's just getting that element or the value of the element username and checking its length is 0. If it is 0, error username length is 0, else return null. It says same thing for the password. Check, get that password value and check whether it is 0 and return error in password, or else return 0. So you can see that if else you have here, right, and the checking the condition with a relational operator or with double equals, you have at the same time you can find less than, greater than, all these operators in JavaScript. Okay, and calling these functions and sending an alert message. Alert is just a pop-up message that will display the result. Okay, so that's the JavaScript. Of course, you have to go through in this JavaScript details, like working on this JavaScript to know the JavaScript language. It's how to declare the variables, how we assign the values, how we use the if else, how to write the methods, calling these methods, passing parameters, and so on, right? So you have to go through these. We will touch here, which is some new elements which are added in HTML5, and we'll talk about the form tag. Okay, what's new in the HTML5, which is the latest version of the HTML, is that HTML5 supports audio video tags. This is new in HTML5. Okay, so that means that there's no need for any plugin to play the audio video in the web page. Okay, so you can use these audio video tags to include the audio or a video in HTML5. HTML5 support the canvas tag here to support 2D graphics drawing, like a drawing of the images or drawing of the shapes, and all can be done by using the canvas tag in HTML5. This is something new in the HTML5. It also introduced the navigation tag, the section tag, article tag, footer tag, header tag, adding a header and a footer to the web page. Okay, these are all different tags which is supported by HTML5, which is new in the HTML5. Okay, HTML5 support for client-side data storage and a cache to allow for validation of data without relying on server-side scripts. It's also help in storing user preferences, retaining the state of an application after closing the browser. So it can user preferences, like what the user has gone through previously, can be stored in HTML5. Client-side data storage allow the web workers or predetermined script to run in the background without affecting the page, right? So client-side data storage can be accessed and can work on it to know what the user is interested in, what he looked previously, and what he is interested in, what he browsed previously, and so on. Okay, cross-document messaging, which allows web document to communicate with another. Messages can be sent from server to the clients. This makes HTML good delivery of web services. That is, sending and receiving the messages between the server and the client is made easy in HTML5. There is also a way of drag and drop for the elements instead of writing the tags, drag and drop is also supported in HTML5. HTML5 supports CSS3, which is good in presentation in doing styling of the HTML pages. The CSS3. It also supports this geolocation, right? Which to know about the location of the device which access the web pages is supported in HTML5. Okay. Okay, so the some of the features in HTML5 which are added in HTML5. The very important tag that we got to learn in HTML5 when we deal with the web applications, that is sending and receiving of the data, is the form tag. The form tag is very important because the form tag is the one through which we can send the data and take some action. Right, we send the data to the server and take some action. Right. So it's a very powerful tool for exchanging the data between the client and the server. So form tag is simply used, it's written by the word called form here. It has different attributes like method, action, and other attributes. It has method defines, what method you want to perform, whether it is in those HTTP methods, post or get method, right? The action defines where you want to submit this form, right? To which server file you want to submit this file. You have to give the URL of that file where you want to send this data, which you entered inside the form. So form basically contains the elements, other elements, which the user can enter the data or select the data, right? So for example, a form may have an element like to enter the date, enter the time, or something like that. Okay. So let's say we have, for example, input elements, right? Input type elements, which can be say what type of input you want to enter. Like for example, password or name or date, what type of input you want to give. There are a lot of input elements with different types, You can go through these input elements. Like for example, here you have input type text. Fine. So it gives me a text field where I can enter some text, right? So I have, for example, first name and last name, input type text, name, first name, value, row, and this is labeled as first name. So this is a label tag where this gives the label, and this is an input tag, which this is an input tag. Okay, this one. And similarly, next line, BR is just a break row. Go to the next line. I add a label here and input type text. And these are all put inside the form tag. Okay, button, of course, this is a button. It's a submit button. When you click on this, the data what we enter is submitted to the action file, to this action file. Okay, of course, all this comes under the form tag. All this comes under the form tag. Unless you put all this in a form tag, it has no meaning, right? So when you click on this, it may go, submit this data to some URL, to some server script. There it can take all this data and do update or do process. So you might have looked into some registration forms. Let's say, for example, you are creating the account in bank or in any commercial websites, creating accounts. So there you'll be given a form, an online form. So these online forms are created by these form tags, and including all these different input types to take all your details, right? So to take, like for example, your name, your ID number, your email, your mobile number, whatever the details are required there. Okay, you're gonna enter and you click on submit. Once you click on submit, so this data is taken to the server after it might be being checked by using JavaScript. for it's the validity of the data. For example, user enter name as 1234. So 1234 cannot be the name. So this validation can be checked at the user side by using JavaScript in the same web page. Just take and validate it. Check for any incorrect data. And if it is everything is correct, then you can send this data to the server, redirect to another page. Okay, this data is taken to the server, and the server script, there can be a JSP or a servlet or any web service can take that data and update the data in the database and return you a confirmation web page or a confirmation message. Okay, account is being created, an email has been sent to your email, something like this. Okay, so all this happens started from the form tag, started from the form inside the web page. Okay, so we also have other tags, like for example, we have this select tag inside the form to select one of the value from a number of values. Okay, we have this field set and legend. You want to make a field of data, if you have a number of data in this format, for example. So if you say a field set, it means that you are grouping the data. Okay, and you want to add a legend, it means adding that to this group and giving a heading, kind of heading to this group of data. Just 2 minutes, it's the prayer call finish and we'll continue. Okay, so this field set and legend will help us to group the data in a form or in a web page, and giving the title to that group of the data will help us in this one. Okay, of course, this also comes inside the form tag. This also comes inside the form tag, this one. Okay, so that's about the HTML. So of course, we got to learn more about the HTML at its different tags, or more importantly, that we learn the form tag and the input elements right? Where it takes the input data, so we can send the data to the back to the server for processing, or we can validate the data. Okay, and can also retrieve the data back from the server. Okay, so but let's try to understand the one of the concept in the HTML is document object model. This document object model is a technique by which we can view the web page in a tree format or in a hierarchical structure format made up of object. So every element can be made up of an object here. Okay, the DOM itself is not part of JavaScript but is been defined by the W3C, and DOM is used in the JavaScript to retrieve the HTML elements, and its contents. Okay, the document object model technique is being used in JavaScript to retrieve the HTML elements. Okay, so any web page, any HTML document can be represented in a DOM model and can be retrieved by using this technique of document object model. Okay, so for example, let's say that for any DOM object we can represent in a form of tree. Like we have a top object called document, which means the web page. Okay, we have the HTML under it, the HTML tag. Now this is the HTML tag is the one which is the start tag of the HTML web page and the end tag where it comes all the HTML. And then inside the HTML we have the head. Inside the head we have a title, and what is the title value. Okay, and then inside the body we have the header tags, paragraph tag, and all other tags and its values. Fine. So this is the view of the whole HTML document in a tree format. Okay, in a document object model, in a document object model form. Okay, so the current view, current window, which is the web page. Under the web page we have the document, which is a document, and it has images, forms, links, anchor, all other tags. This window also has some history, has some location from where this web page is being accessed, some navigators to navigate. Okay, fine. The document object can be used to retrieve all the different elements of the web page. Document object is a child of window object and allow us to manipulate the web page. That means the web page contents. So using this document.p, for example, can get that paragraph. Okay, document.p, that ID, using the ID, we can get that paragraph and change the contents of the paragraph and so on. Navigator object, that is windows.navigator, allow us to retrieve the information about the browser that has been used to access this web page. The navigator object, you can identify the name of the browser and also the operating system the client is using, which is accessing this web page by using navigator.platform. So if you want to know that which browser is accessing this web page, which browser is what is the platform device from where this web page is being accessed. Images, of course, document.image, we can retrieve the images inside the web page. Fine. So we have three different methods usually to get the elements of this document, the web page. Get element by ID, get element by name, or get element by tag name. This, if you use this, you are accessing that element by the ID attribute of that element. Get element by ID, it means you have to give the attribute ID and then you can access that. Okay, you can show that here in the NetBeans where we just did some, yeah, here it said like get element by ID demo. Now is this ID demo over here, ID demo, dot inner dot HTML over here to the text and make it the text here. Okay, so if I have another tag, let's say for example I have h1 tag with id as head. Okay, and this is the head, and I'm closing the header. So I say, like for example, say document dot get element by id of head dot inner HTML. What I'm gonna give the HTML here is that heading 1. Okay. So now document dot get element by id of head dot inner dot HTML. So where is that element h1 with the id head? So here we're gonna set to heading 1. Okay, so I'll just run this file. I think let me just show you that. I'm sorry. Yeah, so you can see that heading 1 when we set document.get element by id. So this is like getting the document elements by the id. We have a get element by name. If you have the attribute name there, in place of id you can say name is equal to something. Name is equal to head, or name is equal to xyz, something like that. Then you can access that by using name. Get element by tag name, access element with a tag name, with a given tag name. Okay, you can access this. Now here there is some names and IDs. When we are using names and IDs, get element by ID, get element by name. In HTML, names which is used as an attribute, okay, can be repeated. That means can have a similar names for different tags, and which are maybe non-unique. You can have same name for different elements. Okay, but IDs should be unique in HTML file. ID should be unique, must be unique in the document. Fine. So it is good that you include the IDs, but if you are including the names, then there is an ambiguity for the JavaScript. So the last one will be the retrieved. Okay, when we access with a name parameter. Okay, so IDs are used to refer to the element within a document from JavaScript and must be unique. If ID is not unique, then the first element with a specified ID is used. Okay, and we cannot access the subsequent elements. Okay, so IDs must be unique. Names can also be used in this place, but the preferred is the IDs. Okay, fine. So you can also create the node, in the sense you can create the elements and you can add that element to the document, to the HTML file. Okay, so for example, like here in this method, add a message with the ID and text. Create text node. That means that it creates a HTML node, okay, as a text, and get that element, okay, and append to this element the new node. That means that you can add the new tag, HTML tag, to the existing element. Under the existing element you can add a new tag. Okay, fine. So we also have some, some other methods from the DOM can be used
Doctor,
in.
teacher, can you stop and complete it next lecture, because a lot of information now.
Okay, fine. Okay, Fine, I'll stop here. And I think we don't have much after this. It's all to do the activities. Fine. I think this is our last page over here. Yeah, this is the end of the part 4. And after this, we have, of course, do the activities on these HTML, especially on the HTML forms. Okay. So, Khalas, we'll stop here for today and wait for my videos on activities. I'm gonna, of course, prepare the videos on activities that I have to do on part 3 for the REST full web services. And I'll also prepare a video on HTML to create HTML documents that include forms and submitting the forms to the server, okay, with the data. I don't have access for the activity part 1. Activities part 1, I think we already discussed that, right, in our second meeting. That's about servlets and all. The video, I will check that, inshallah, and I'll share with you again, inshallah, with all the students, okay. And the videos of these this lecture will also be shared with you very soon, inshallah. Okay, fine. So we'll close for today, and please do the activity which I already sent to you. Do the activity of part 2, and you know, get over with the part 2 activities. And inshallah, I'm gonna send you activities of part 3 and part 4. Okay. Again, I'm repeating, activities are very important. Activities are very important here to learn. Okay. And of course, yeah, you have to give more time to this course in learning different things. Okay, because it has a lot of things to learn. You have to give more time to this course. This is level 3 course, 8 credit hours, has a lot of information. Okay, it's not a simple course. So please give more time to this course. Learn all those technologies. You have a lot of resources available apart from the course, from outside the course, you know, and it will be very good and very helpful for you for your graduation project. And even after you graduate, you want to work on the web applications, it will give a lot of help. About the test, inshallah, I think the test timetable is displayed on the university website, is given in the university website. But the structure, inshallah, will be shared with you. Fine. I will include, I think, block 1, complete block 1 for the test. We left with the part 5, which talks about security. So I'll include the whole block 1, part 1 to part 5. Mostly we'll focus from part 2 to part 5. Okay. And inshallah, as you know, it will be 1 hour in the lab in campus. You have to come to the university to take that midterm test in the lab, and it will be multiple choice questions, inshallah. Okay. And I'll have an extra session to give you more about what to prepare for the test. Okay, so do not worry about that, and just do the activities, try to learn the things, and also go through these slides. Okay, that will help you, inshallah.
Doctor.
Yes.
Please don't forget to look at
I'll reply to your email because I did not check the emails as it is a weekend, and I was also busy in other things. So I'll check the email, inshallah. I'll let you know, inshallah. I'll send you the details.
Thank you a lot.
Okay. For MT, as I said, we include block 1 completely, inshallah. Memorizing, there is less memorizing here in this course. A lot of practical things here. Okay. Right. Go through what is there in the slides. When it comes to memorizing, or you want to, remember those terms and all, go through the slides. That will be enough. But practically doing activities is very important. Test will be on both theoretical and practical. But practical, don't expect like I'll ask you to write the program. No, might ask to give some annotations or some terms which is used in this practical activities. That's why I'm asking you to do the activities. Okay. I'll give you more details, inshallah, in one extra session before the test. I'll take one extra session and give you all the details. Inshallah, I want you to score good marks in the assessment so that you will be prepared and you will be, encouraged to the final exam. Fine. Anything else? Shall we close?
Yeah, we can leave, Doctor.
Yes, just a minute, please, brother. I'm not gonna count any attendance. There is no absent for this class, as it is other student might have another class. Okay, but again, I'll download the attendance just to make sure that okay, I had this class and these students did attend with me. And thank you very much for joining in this session. I know you might have other work, but it's also a very important thing to have. Yes, you can leave now. Thank you very much for attending.
Welcome. Bye.